Hey, this is Matt with Divine Superconductor TV, and I'm here with Raw Matt.
What's up?
We're going to talk about honey today.
That's right.
So, honey, I've been into for years. I've gone back and forth with vegan, paleo, raw vegan. I've done all the diets, liquidarian. But one thing I've always kept in my diet is honey. Intuitively, I've always just felt so good from it. And there's a reason for that, right, Matt?
Absolutely. Honey is awesome. It's one of the super supplements that's out there, and it's really a shame that vegans kind of neglect this as a supplement or a food that's in their diet, simply because it's an animal product. And I can understand the correlation between animal cruelty and abuse and everything, but really to call it bee vomit is just absurd, because in fact this isn't just like a multivitamin for people. It helps fight arthritis, it helps pull calcium deep into the bones, it's the highest food in the world in enzymes. So if you've gone through cancer or chemotherapy and radiation treatments and you've lost your salivary glands, this food really helps assimilate all types of carbohydrates because it contains amylase. It really is like a power food, so it's just a shame that people neglect this and don't just keep bees themselves just so they can obtain the honey. I mean, you can easily trade bees for the foods. They love goji berries and ginseng, and they love, I mean, you don't just give them sugar water, you can give them other honey as well. They produce more honey than they actually need. They produce about 60 pounds getting ready for a winter, and they'll only consume about 30. And they only eat honey simply because of the fact that honey is their caloric source during times when there's no pollen for them to gather in the summer. So honey is just like their extra source. So if you have extra pollen for them, you can leave that. That's what I do. I'll grind up a bunch of pine pollen for my friend Marcus, and then I'll have those as buckets, and they'll feast on that, so I can actually have all of their honey. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, I would imagine most people haven't harvested it themselves. They just, like me, I've always bought it from the store. I've seen a couple beehives in my life, but I've never had the opportunity or to actually learn how to get honey from the hive. And Matt was telling us earlier that what you can do is take your old shirt and hang it up by the tree, and they'll actually get used to your scent. You can actually do that when I used to keep snakes as well. It works for a lot of animals. You just put a piece of your clothing with them, and over time they'll get used to their scent, so they'll be less aggressive towards you.
That's right, and the bees are such an amazing animal anyway, and since we're really losing them, it's more buying honey from these bee farmers is actually keeping these bee populations alive, because they want these bees. And though they really want the wax from the bees, the honey is just a secondary byproduct. They don't really make much from the honey, but they make it all from the wax because it's used in cosmetic products. But the honey itself is very, very medicinal. And if people could just add it a little bit to their foods, to their drinks, they'll notice a health benefit just from doing that. And you can use it to preserve your foods, because honey doesn't allow oxidation to take effect, so you can infuse herbs that you might have bought too many of and you just don't know what to do and how to save them. So just infuse those herbs into your honey, and you'll really be able to sustain those herbs for years to come, rather than their normal 6-month lifespan.
So a question that you mentioned, adding them to elixirs. What if we add them to like a hot elixir, would that destroy the medicinal benefits, or is that mainly just if you cook it for a long period of time?
No, any type of heat really can disrupt the system that's in the honey. For example, most enzymes that are in the honey are destroyed at about 104 degrees. So the bees are very protective of the honey themselves, because they will take their the comb and the wax and everything, and they'll surround it in propolis, which keeps it cool itself. Wow. And they'll keep it off the ground in the trees in the shade. They protect the honey from the sunlight themselves, so they intrinsically know that they don't want to degrade the honey themselves.
Wow.
And their function from honey is to keep their hive warm. So they beat their wings to keep a constant temperature, and that's why the honey is, they never sleep. They're the only animal in the world that we know of that never sleeps.
Probably because they're raw foodists, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, that pollen, they've got something going on, right? In the royal jelly for the queen, there's something going on there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the whole beehive, I've heard it said from some of my mentors that bee products are the most concentrated source of nutrition, and maybe even the only source of nutrition on the planet right now, because it's actually like pre-digested plant protein, right? Like the pollen, you're actually getting It's all the flowers in your local environment, right? Condensed.
That's right. It's the essence of all of the air that we breathe. So people that have a lot of allergies, they get relief from the honey, but they really don't know why. One of the main reasons is because it's also very high in a B vitamin called pantothenic acid, and this vitamin is very protective to the adrenal glands. And they also contain such a vast array of mineralization going on that it's comparative to ocean salt and sea salt. So,
Wow.
you know, just another reason that honeys are so good.
And we've had the conversation before with the types of sugars. Yeah, I love talking about all the bee products. So without going off on pollen or royal jelly, which I would love to, just stick with honey for a minute. The sugars in here, you were mentioning it's invert sugar, right?
Yeah, there isn't a fermentation effect that really goes on with honeys. They do make mead, but that really comes from the heating process mixed with water, where it's actually heated up and allowed to ferment because everything in it's kind of destroyed at that point. So it allows that innervate sugar to actually take effect. But yeah, the sugars that are in honey are actually quite low. The glycemic index can be 55 in honey. And so that's why the people say don't do honey if you're diabetic, because all of them, once they've been processed, cooked, and heated, have actually raised their glycemic index now because you've destroyed a lot of those things that slow it down.
What's the breakdown? It has fructose, sucrose, right?
Yeah, that's right. The concentrations can be vary dependent on the variety of honeys. I would have to say that they can be around 50-50.
Okay.
One of those two types of sugars. It isn't a disaccharide though. There are more than just those two sugars, so people should know that, because disaccharide sugars bypass the liver and go directly into the bloodstream.
Wow.
So people have to really watch for those types of things, especially if they're diabetic. They don't really know how to bypass the liver and get right in the bloodstream. Seedless grapes are like that. A lot of processed sugars. Beets are like that.
Okay.
Date sugar is like that.
So I have an interesting question for you. A lot of my viewers are into intermittent fasting, cyclic fasting, you know, having like an eating window of say 6 to 8 hours, eating 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day. So lately I've been using honey during my eating window. Is that just, am I giving myself too much sugar, or is honey a perfect kind of companion for the ketogenic, kind of like an intermittent fasting diet?
I would have to say that it's really good, and it would be the one to have away from your fruits. Meaning, a lot of people that do polyphasic eating or intermittent fasting have a tendency to cram a lot of the dense, heavier foods into a meal, and by doing that, you oftentimes neglect the fruits because they're not sustainable. Meaning, they don't fill you up. They're not anabolic. They don't digest slowly, they digest quickly. So by intermittent fasting, having a 1 meal a day, you neglect your fruits, and then you imbalance your potassium to sodium ratio. So I'm a huge fan on getting the fruits in on one part of the diet with some good nuts and seeds, and then later in the day when you have your concentrated dense meal, you can have your honey at that point, because it will help with digestion. Kind of like apple cider vinegar helps with protein digestion because it helps stimulate hydrochloric acid. It contains trypsin, the enzyme. This honey will do the same thing with amylase and starches and carbohydrates.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a good builder.
It's just like my magnesium. It's the chloride reacts with the hydrogen in the stomach and creates hydrochloric acid.
Yeah, I love it.
It seems to be all about boosting your hydrochloric acid, because a lot of people have low hydrochloric acid and they're taking these pills that contain it, right?
Absolutely. The constant cooking of these foods degrade the glutathione in the body, and when those levels drop, hydrochloric acid levels drop, and that's one thing that we see with the human body is everything gets to a point where it kind of peaks, and then everything after that is over the hill, they call it, right? So everything is about balance and keeping that equilibrium going, and that's why polyphasic eating works. Isn't because it's not what they're doing, it's because of the things they're neglecting, letting their body actually produce these hormones rather than eating, creating an insulin response and stopping everything. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of just keeping that good balance going inside the human body. A lot of people neglect that until they get a little sick, right? So, how sick do bees get?
Never.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm just saying, there's an interesting thing. And what do animals fight for? What do bears look for when they're in nature? They'll go crazy for honey.
Wow.
They'll hunt it down. They'll take the whole hive for themselves and they'll feast on it because of the caloric intake of it, and they're intuitively drawn to it.
And then you look at monkeys, right? And they're scraping algae up and eating algae.
That's right.
Shilajit.
Yeah, exactly. If you were to go inside your house and go into your refrigerator and open up some of those foods and leave them outside, you're going to be hard pressed to find a lot of even insects who will want that food. You open this up, some raw honey, pour that down, you're going to get insects, you're going to get flies, you're going to get animals, you're going to get humans. Everything will go to that. What is this? You literally are going to get everything drawn to it. So
Right.
that tells you right there, it's pretty good for you, because plants don't, animals, insects, they really don't go to the toxic plants. That's how we can distinguish between them.
Yeah, before this recording, we were talking about how you mentioned how bees will actually avoid plants with pesticides and GMO Monsanto fields, right?
That's right, yeah. Be careful with a lot of sage-bot honey if you're watching this, because sage is another name for soy honey. And a lot of Monsanto crops will use soy and genetically modified number 2 corn for processing of high fructose corn syrup. So they'll grow a lot of these, and then they'll release bees, because that's the best way to pollinate. And Monsanto, believe me, has bees as well. So when they sell their honeys, then the sage honey is actually a GMO type of honey. So those bees aren't going to go very far. Remember, they have 25 miles of crop that they can't get away from. But most honey that you're going to buy will be organic, simply because bees won't go to herbicide, insecticide, fungicide sprayed plants.
Yeah, at the local co-op here, we have high desert bee pollen, high desert honey. Is that generally good
That
stuff?
is a good honey. I like. They also make an avocado honey that's really good. It's,
Oh, wow.
It's black in color. They don't have noni, which is
Wow.
also black, but their avocado is really good.
So one interesting thing that just came to mind is they say if you eat honey in your local environment, it helps you with allergies, right? Because if you're having allergies from the local plants, if you eat the honey, it'll kind of get you used to it. Is that right?
Because we're breathing that very air that's been pollinated by the bees that are going to these very same plants. So you're getting the essence of all those plants. It's almost like a homeopathic way of doing that. Now, homeopathic, they found, really doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because they're using good to help boost good, meaning they're trying to take bile to produce bile. But what they've actually found, homeopathic started simply because if a person was going to be around, let's say, high concentrations of a toxic element, they can take little doses of it homeopathically, and their body could adapt to that. So you're doing the same thing, but homeopathically, that you are with pollens, meaning you have an allergy to something that's in the air, like a hay fever, for example. Honeys will help you get used to that hay fever.
Wow.
So because they're pollinating that very essence of that plant itself.
So is there any benefit from taking, say, honey from Brazil if I'm here in like San Diego, or?
There wouldn't necessarily be an allergy benefit but there would be a floral benefit that you're still getting from the honeys. Believe me, it's not just sugar water that you're eating when you take honey. And so yeah, you're still getting the mineral concentrations, and you're still getting vitamins, you're still getting the enzyme content, you're still getting all those benefits, but you're not going to get the benefits of the allergens. But a lot of people that take honey don't do it for that reason.
Right.
And there's a lot of other things that they can do really instead of honey for allergies that are going to work just as well.
That's great. Wow. Cool. Yeah. Let me see if any other questions on honey. I think that's pretty good.
That was more than, I think you only had like 5 minutes anyway, so
Yeah.
that's pretty good. We did good.
Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks, Matt.
Absolutely. Happy birthday to Matt here.
It's my birthday, and
Yeah.
stay supercharged.
That's right.